WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. All of our ongoing NFL draft coverage brought to you by friends at Wise Markets. We're having wise conversations now, and certainly thinking about grilling out, cooking out, Mother's Day around the corner. We'll be telling you more about everything going on with Wise. Make sure you're rounding up for our friends at the MDA and Muscular Dystrophy Association as you get ready for draft weekend. We thought it'd be fun with just the 27th draft pick. Now Eric DeCosta is sort of ramped things up with the dealing of Orlando Brown to Kansas City. In joins us from, I know this guy through Twitter and through football handbooks and stuff he does. He's been a recurring cast of characters that we have here at Draft Time. Matt Manocherian's up in New York City, the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, comprehensive scouting and analytics guy. You can find him at Matt Mano. That's Mano. What's up, Matt? Happy draft season to you. I've expanded my conversation above and beyond sports here, so I don't reach to everybody on the draft side, but this is a particularly juicy one. I think it got even juicier after Friday, where the Ravens now have 2 picks in the top first round and at 27 and 31, and maybe a little bit of firepower to make some noise on draft night.
Oh yeah, I think it's exciting. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. I'm always happy to be here. Can't wait for the draft. It feels like it's been coming forever throughout the year, and we're finally here. That Orlando Brown trade makes things really, really juicy. I mean, we love him as a player. He was one of the top graded tackles that we've had over the last 2 years at Sports Info Solutions in the entire league. He was number 1 and number 2 in each of the last 2 years. So we love Orlando Brown. Thought he played great on the left side, but obviously it was crowded over there. It was an embarrassment of riches. So the trade goes down, and now, like you said, at 27 and 31, that's ammunition. You could be moving up from there. You could be moving down from there if they're quarterback needy teams trying to get maybe one of those number 6 quarterback off the board if they want to get that extra year under the contract for drafting him at the end of round 1. So it could be very interesting.
Well, I mean, the one thing that we've come to realize, and maybe the impulsiveness of Eric DeCosta a couple of years ago in signing Earl Thomas, but when it comes to these draft picks and what they're doing, this trade didn't happen on Friday, right? I mean, this thing's been getting put together, and all the pieces of all the picks going back and forth, and the weights and the measurement. I saw somebody said it equates out to the 45th overall pick. Whatever it equates out to an extra year for the player of 31. It equates to extra firepower for something that the Ravens take seriously. And this draft is even more difficult because half the teams didn't play last year. Half the teams only played half the games last year. You have opt-outs where the Ravens system and their continuity really plays a large factor in them thinking maybe they have a market advantage in this year's draft.
Yeah, I think most teams do a pretty poor job in general of understanding value, understanding really what the value of a draft pick is, what having a player under contract is. And I think the Ravens are stand out amongst the league in doing that. I know on the surface, there can be a lot of it can be easy to think we lost Orlando Brown. Why are we just getting a second round pick basically back in exchange for Orlando Brown? But at the same time, he's a guy that's going to get paid $20 million a year from now. He's going to get a $20 million a year contract. And there's an opportunity cost that comes along with that. Switch back to this year's draft. I think that in the top 100 picks, it's as strong as any year. I really think that there's a strong top of this draft. Obviously, we know about the quarterbacks. We know about some of the top receivers. But then you go a little deeper. I think really you go about 3 rounds deep with some quality players, starting level type players, before you start to see a drop off. And then I think day 3 is where you see kind of the value shift in this year's draft. So the teams that can be aware from that and kind of play that market advantage, it's huge because there's a ton of uncertainty and there are just much fewer players than there would be in a typical year that are actually in the draft pool.
Matt Manocherian joining us here. He's Matt Mano out on Twitter. You can find him for all things football. As we get, you mentioned ratings and system. I've had lots of the Football Outsiders guys on. I've known those guys for years. I had Tanier on this week's matter of fact, old school gangsters, in putting together stats and analytics. Give me a little bit of your background for our audience on what you do to grade football players, because I think this has become, much like we see on the baseball side of analytics, very, very science-based and measurement-based.
Yeah, I think what separates us at Sports Info Solutions is our ability to take into account both the sort of old school analog scouting side of things with all of the years and years of experience. And that goes back to my background as a scout. I was with the Saints and with the Browns for the first 5 years of my career. both on the pro side and on the college side. We've taken the best elements of kind of the scouting wisdom that's come down through the decades and incorporated that into our scouting scale. So we separate that completely at Sports Info Solutions, what's on the scouting report from the analytics. And that's the more new agey stuff that you're talking about. And what we really do there is everything from breaking down things into different situations. What did this player do in the red zone? What did he do on third down? What did he do under pressure? All of that sort of stuff. How did this receiver perform when he was running this type of route versus, what's he doing on dig routes versus a corner route, that sort of thing. But then boiling that down even further, understanding the quality of competition that each player is going against and some of those advanced metrics that you talk about. But I think our advanced metrics are a little bit, what separates them is that they tend to kind of match our scouting. Not all the time. It's never going to be 100%, and it shouldn't be because they're different opinions, they're different perspectives on the player. I always say a scout, there are things that you can't quantify that a scout can gather. But at the same time, we try to make our numbers reflect what scouts are looking at as much as possible, because the great advantage that the numbers have is they have no bias and they can watch all the games.
Matt, for me, when I talk about the Ravens in the modern era, the last 3 years, Flacco's departure and everything that they've done in regard to drafting, running, wanting to run, as much as the fans here want to talk about wide receivers and passing the football, you did this at a high level scouting. You sat in meetings with guys yelling at each other about the value of players and what we're going to do. Give me a little primer for your thoughts from 3 years ago when the Ravens say, yeah, we're going to take this kid from Louisville. We're going to get an extra year out of him. We're going to completely break the mold. We're going to go in a completely different direction for how we're going to build our offense, how we're going to build our football team, how we're going to want Nick Boyles and Willie Sneads, and we're going to want fat backs, and we're going to want run blocking offensive linemen, and where that value is going to be, that how they would look at a Zeitler, or how they might be looking at a Villanueva now versus where they were, and also how they evaluate wide receivers when free agents aren't going to sign here because you don't throw the ball enough for them or their agents or for their pocketbook. But when it comes to drafting a wide receiver, that this franchise looks at everything offense very, very differently than anyone traditional, and certainly different than most teams in the league are going to grade players.
Yeah. So what the Ravens have done that's really interesting by being one of the most sort of analytics forwards team in the league, they think about things very progressively. They have a lot of really smart analysts that they're constantly weighing the opinion. We see it with Harbaugh and his fourth down decision making. Certainly he goes with his gut, but at the same time, he's empowered with a lot of really intelligent analysis that allow him to look at situations just differently than a traditionalist would. And what the Ravens have done that's really interesting is we in analytics community are saying pass, 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 just like the Ravens fans are. But the Ravens have all of a sudden come and become run focused as an analytics team. It's almost like, how does that add up? And the way that it adds up is they're zigging where others zag. And when you zig where others zag, you can create market inefficiencies where you can find things. So what have they done? They've realized that this is a league where everybody that performs in the passing game, all the wide receivers, as soon as they have their 10 touchdown season, whatever else it is, those guys get paid and you don't have a sustainable economic model. I think what they've done really is looked at things in a way of saying, not just how do we get the best players, but how do we get the best players and sustain players at every position that we can be getting better value than what we're paying for. This is a salary cap sport. So if we can get better value than what we're paying for across the board by zigging where others zag, we'll do that. And it's netted them Lamar Jackson. And I think that's been a huge success in terms of what he's become and what this offense can be. I think there are limitations. You got to use every inch of the field. You can't do everything in between the hashes and focus it all on the running game. But at the same time, I love the approach of, instead of saying, everybody else is pass, pass, pass. How do we figure out this passing league? They've said, how can we actually use the rules that make running something that you can use to your advantage and build that into what we're doing in the passing game? So our play action passing game and our tight ends in the passing game, they all fit in complementary with our running game. I think it's fantastic, and it's strategically, it's zigging where others zag, and I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Tough sell in an organization, though, right? It can only be sold in a place where there's continuity. And Matt, you talk about these deals and stuff that you're thinking about the fifth year on a guy's contract. most of the people making picks this weekend don't think that they'll be making picks in 2023 or 2024. They don't have any sort of job security in regard to the franchise because the Ravens make these decisions. I mean, you mentioned the value of Lamar Jackson and trading back. Think about what happened with Hayden Hurst. They wind up having to deal him out because he's then disgruntled more quietly than Orlando Brown last year. They turned that into J.K. Dobbins. The Orlando Brown deal last week is dealing a guy they drafted into the 80s to get a pick in the 30s to get an extra year for that pick. And Eric DeCosta will have lived through all 8 years of the beginning of picking Orlando Brown to dealing him away to saying, well, do we want a comp pick? Do we want to be our right tackle, disgruntled, and then get a comp pick 2 years from now? Or do I want a 31 right now? Let's go right now. And the last 3 months and even last week, I had Peter King on last week. I had Jeff Zrebeck last week. You'll hear all of this out at Baltimore Positive. We all poo-pooed the notion that Orlando Brown would be dealt because we felt like the Ravens felt like, kid, go play right tackle because we got a year left on you and you will go be angry and you'll play hard and you'll go get your money and we'll win a Super Bowl. That it is even more strange that they gave him away, gave the last year of him away to get a draft pick to get more years essentially and to save some money, as you pointed out. But it wasn't money they were going to have to spend this year. They had him to go try to win a Super Bowl right here and now while Lamar's still on a rookie deal, and they zagged again. They made a Friday afternoon deal that shocked. I think most people in the league were shocked that a deal was made.
Yeah, I can't stress how much I love Orlando Brown, the player. And I think you're spot on when you talk about continuity playing a role in this, because when you have continuity, when I was in New Orleans, Sean Payton used to say he learned from Bill Parcells, there are about 8 teams competing. There aren't really 32 teams. There are about 8 teams that are actually in this competition to win a Super Bowl every year. And that's who you need to worry about. That's who and a big part of that is continuity. When everything's getting shuffled around every 3 years in other places, it's really hard to actually build something that's sustainable. Now, along with that, you mentioned DeCosta and what he did with Orlando Brown. Okay, drafted him lower than everybody else because he was able to see through. He dropped in the draft because he ran a slow 40 time. I mean, ridiculous stuff. When you turn on the film of him in Oklahoma, it looks just like the film of him in Baltimore. He plays he does outstanding player for 3 years for Baltimore, including being able to shift over into the left tackle role this year and help sustain the playoff run there. Then you trade him. You're getting a better pick than you gave up for him when you actually drafted him. You're getting, like you said, you went and drafted him in the 80s and you're picking up the equivalent of 45 in return. This sounds like a sustainable strategy for me. Like, I know not every player is going to be a hit like that, but in a salary cap sport.
Well, when they are a hit, you take a salary cap hit.
Right. So I think that when you look into the way they're building the organization, they're clearly they believe in paying defensive backs. They believe in building up front. And I think that the team building strategy is a good one. I think it's a sound one. And I think the more that you can keep accumulating assets and accumulating value, the more you're going to be positioned for success years and years into the future. So I think, I would be careful if I was a Baltimore fan really complaining about what's going on here, because in terms of having a sustained vision for success to be one of those 8 teams every year, I think that's exactly what Baltimore is doing.
Former scout with the Saints and the Browns. You can find him out on Twitter as well as doing the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. Matt Manocherian joining us here. You can find him at Matt Mano, M-A-N-O, out on Twitter. Last thing on these picks in 27 and 31 in regard to the Ravens and where we are here and what their needs are. Edge rusher. You mentioned offensive line. The Marshall Yanda thing. I'm a big center guy, right? So if Bradley Bozeman's going to be your center, if they really believe that, great. But they better get better center play than they've had, and certainly losing Marshall Yanda, which is, you just don't replace that guy. You talk about draft picks that worked out okay. There's another one, right? You should hope that you can find that. But when you got a dart of 27 and a dart of 31 in a draft where you feel like you have some needs, wide receiver we mentioned, I feel like the Ravens are well placed. Some thoughts about some players that we may be seeing coming to Baltimore if they select the 27 and 31.
Yeah, I think when you're looking for the Ravens, I look at the offensive tackle position being pretty deep when you start to get there. So Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater should be long gone. Probably Christian Darrisaw too. But guys like Liam Eichenberg, Samuel Cosme, Jalen Mayfield. Jalen Mayfield is a really interesting fit coming out of Michigan. He's a young player. kind of really excels in the run game, though, because of his upper body strength. A guy that, when you talk about Marshall Yanda and Orlando Brown and the way that those guys just mauled people, he's another guy that I think can grow into a real mauler there. I think he would be great value at the end of the first round for them. The edge class is similar. Once you get past, there's not really anybody that's like Chase Young this year, but there are a whole bunch of guys that should be there towards the end of the first round. We got 3 rushers out of Miami. I like Jalen Phillips the best out of them. Other people have different opinions, but I think there are some of those players there. You could look at the edge rush position, and you can look anywhere on the offensive line. There are some interior players too that could be available there. Several spots. And I think really what you're looking at is there's a value drop off after the top 10 this year. So being in that sort of end of the first round and really into rounds 2 and 3, I think is a great place to have a lot of draft picks in this year's draft.
Matt Manocherian, you can find him. Tell folks about the handbook and how they can get in touch with you and find your work.
Yeah, check out the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. You can get it on Amazon. You can get your Kindle copy instantly. And you can find me, as you mentioned, at Matt Mano, MattMano, and Sports Info Solutions is at sportsinfo_SIS.
Hey man, I hope you you have the equivalent of getting some delicious Royal Farms chicken up there, some beer in the fridge. You get things. This is a great weekend to just sit and get back into football. I almost forgot Urban Meyer's running the Jaguars till I woke up this morning. I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. How many things I've forgotten about that are actually happening in the league, right? It's a little bit of a refresher course.
Yeah, it's weird until you actually see it. It's like, did that really happen? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, it'll be fun. And the remote, I just hope we get some cocoa with Roger late on Thursday night with his slippers on. I hope we get that. Matt, take care of yourself. Happy drafting to you this weekend. We'll be following, okay?
All right, take care.
Matt Manocherian, find him at Matt Mano and the SIS Football Rookie Handbook as well. You can find me anywhere the internet is served. We are WNST.net AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.